Hello everybody and welcome to yet another Astral Aviation workshop. On is departures, arrivals and updates. This workshop is once again brought to you by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. It's great to see you with us this evening on this sweltering 27 degree in London. So thank you for coming along. My name is Chris Kidd and I'm the Director of Astral Aviation Consulting. And I will be joined this evening by Matt Lane. Matt Lane is hi Matt. He is the head of training and an active single and multi-engine FI and flight examiner. Sorry, the head of training for RAF Sport Aircraft. Apologies. Hello again, Matt. Matt's one of our regulars. If you want to keep up to date on various bits and bobs and safety information that we're pushing out, then please do sign up to our mailing list and have a look on our website. The detail is in the chat box now. This is an interactive event possible. So please, throughout the course of the evening, feel free to have any questions, stick those in the Q&A box if you will, and then we'll get to those at the end. Please have any interesting little bits, anything that you'd like to comment on in the chat box as we and we'll pick up on those as well. So they're going to pop up throughout, and Matt and I will be running with those. Please do interact with those. We'd love to get your thoughts and experiences with those as well. So, over the course of the next hour, what are we going to cover? We're going to cover departures, obviously. So, in section 1, Matt's going to cover off departures, how to fly them safely, and things to consider when doing so. In section 2, I'm going to look at some arrivals, different types, again, how to fly them safely, and things prior to and during the phase of flight. Matt will then move on to RP, what's important, how it can be used, and awareness to both departure recovery and on using it effectively. Then finally, in section 4, we'll time for Q&A. Okay, so as always, as I mentioned, let's get involved with polls. We are having a few technical issues this evening, so I'm going to talk to you about that. So without further ado, Matt, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Hopefully the internet here in West Oxford is slightly better than London, so I think Chris is going to disconnect and reconnect and try to solve that. But we'll crack on with my bit about departures for now. So before we get into details, let's start with a quick poll. And what we'd like to do this is just to see basically who we've got on the call today as well. So if we can have the first poll, please. So here we go. Just two choices here. What's the most common type of airfield you fly to? So like I say, there's no right or wrong answers with this. Let's just you know, get an idea of what kind of airfield most people flying to or from. Okay, is it uncontrolled or controlled? We'll give you about another 10 seconds, and we if Chloe can kindly, when she thinks you've got a good response, Chloe, if you want to pop up the results for us, let's have a look what we've got there. Look at that, about 61% of you uncontrolled, about 40% to control. So a fairly good split actually there as well. We're not really biased one way or another. So that'll be interesting to see as we go through. So departures are easy, aren't they? It's just a case of, you know, we've already got it prepped and all the rest of it. We lined up on the runway, off we go, simple. Well, it isn't really, is it? Let's face it, because we do see pilots getting this wrong. We've seen runway excursions on departure. We still see loss of control incidents and accidents during the departure phase. People have airspace infringements quite often during departures. I've had to deal with a number of those myself, sadly. So what things can catch us out in this phase of flight? Let's have a look. So let's have a look at preparation for flight. So here we go. I'm going to touch on three aspects that I'd like you to think about in this thing: weather, performance, and profile. That's the departure profile is what we're talking about here as well. So in terms of preparation, how much preparation do we do? We often talk about preparation. Many of us may focus more on the technical aspects of that though as well. Especially if you fly from the same airfield day after day, time after time as well, it could get routine to us because doesn't anything change? Nothing change? Well, there might be a few things, but we contend do change as well. You know, the winds will be different. The temperature, look at the conditions we're experiencing at the minute, very different temperatures and factors. The aircraft mass and balance as well, and our fuel loading and our ability to react as an individual as well to emergencies will be different depending on how we've slept, how hydrated we are, and a whole bunch of other human factors as well. So, you know, how do we do this? First thing there, we've got weather. I'm really not going to major into the weather here as well. We should all know there's some really good resources out there. There's good apps. Official documentation, the 214s, 215s, loads of information on that. And even if you haven't got TAF and METAR information at your particular airfield, you can utilize nearby ones as well. Things to really think about in relation to the departure: wind, very much so, cloud base, any other weather phenomena as well, especially if it's going to be transient phenomena, you know, things like gusts or heavy shower cells or whatever going through as well. If you would like to know more about weather planning, we did a full weather planning workshop with Simon, who is absolutely an amazing presenter, really, really good to listen to as well. Chloe's put the link in the chat box there as well. You can watch the replay on that as well. That's all about how to plan for a day trip planning, and we've got more weather workshops coming up with Simon later this year as well. So have a read of those. There's some brilliant stuff in there as well. So moving on then, performance. So is our aircraft performance suitable for the runway and the weather conditions of the day? Now, we all know we need to perform the mass and balance calculation. Let's be honest, do we all do it every single time? Well, it might be, but if you're flying the same aircraft with the same fuel loading and just the same two people or whatever, you may think, I don't always need to do that. But let's have a look at these, the example there as well. We could do a whole seminar on this. We could really go into details of this. We're not going to do this, but some of the key things that we think you should consider are the takeoff mass, the temperature, airfield elevation, winds of the day. And also make sure whatever you're doing, you understand the difference between the takeoff run required and the distance required as well. We can talk about that in Q&A or the chat if you would like to do that. And some of the recommended CA safety factors as well, which hopefully you are all aware as well. So let's have a look. I've done an example here as well. So this is a relatively well loaded PA-28, typical GA training and touring aircraft. Look at that. First example there, tarmac runway at Oxford, 15 degrees. So, you know, not a really hot, not a really cold day. 15 knots down the runway, dry runway, takeoff distance required 590 meters. Really quite comfortable at somewhere like Oxford. In fact, where I'm testing on Friday, somebody should be giving me a calculation quite similar to that, although it'd be different because of the heat. So let's have a look at the second example there as well. Runway 26, Compton Abbas. Look at the temperature, much warmer day, but even so, a lot cooler than we're getting just at the minute. No wind. We do often see that in these high pressure conditions as well. And wet grass, so maybe a shower has gone through recently as well. With the safety factors of 1.33, look at the takeoff distance required there, 1,001 meters. So which, you know, takeoff distance available at Compton Abbas, 799 meters I got from the AIP. So you can see, same aeroplane, not a massive change in conditions, but suddenly your distances can be quite significantly different. Some really good explanations of all of this with all of the safety factors in the Skyway code. So so have a good look. Right, let's have another poll. Let's have a look at poll 2. So before we go on to the final bit I want to discuss on this. How do you normally plan your departure from an airfield? Do you climb overhead and set course? Do you turn straight en route? Or do you use a local feature to start from? Sometimes may have heard that called a remote start point. Or if you're not sure, or you do something different, let us know, and perhaps let us know in the chat. So there you go, 4 options there to think about. Let's have a look at the results then, Chloe, if we can, please. Thank you. So again, a fairly even split, but straight onto heading, remote start features, not so many with the climbing overhead as well. Okay, good. Interesting to see there. But again, as you can see, people do different things, and that will be often influenced by experience and very much influenced by local procedures or local restrictions or factors at your airfield as well, I would suggest as well. So if your airfield has a set departure procedure, and many of these are in fact driven by noise abatement considerations, you should follow it unless it's unsafe or not sensible to do so. So if we can have the next slide, please, as well. Here you go. So here is some of the procedures that you get out there as well. Look at this: noise avoidance, different routings in and out. Some of them can be fairly complex there as well. The only thing I would observe with that as well is if you need to deviate from noise procedures for critical flight safety reasons, such as avoiding another aircraft, or you've got a performance or emergency problem with the aircraft, or there's even a weather avoid as well as real heavy showers. You've got to think about that balance between, okay, I'm not being able to follow the noise abatement, but I'm deviating for an air safety reason there as well. And also, we'll touch on it later, but if you have to make RT calls in line with this as well, please try and get your RT calls in the requisite place when you're actually at those places as well. So it allows other pilots joining or in the circuit to keep their SA, their situational awareness about where to go with that as well. Okay, so how are you going to set course on your intended route? Going back to what we talked about in the poll there, the remote start point is a good example as well. Yeah, rather than trying to climb overhead a busy circuit or making a turnout in confliction with joining traffic potentially, going off out to a local reference point that you can easily identify, be sure of where you are, and setting course from there. It gives you time to settle down, get orientated, and get the aircraft set up in the configuration and the speeds and so on that you'd like as well. So if that's something you haven't practiced using, that may be something that that you would like to think about having a practice with as well. Right, moving on then. We've thought about the relevant bits in some of our pre-flight prep, but we still need to get to the runway. Ironically, this is often some of the hardest and most stressful bits of the flight as well. You need to make sure you know where you're going, and hopefully plates such as in the AIP or Sky Demon or other published procedures you'll have will allow you to work out where you're going to taxi before you set off. And obviously you may need, as part of that, relevant clearances from air traffic or from a FISO at the airfield, as we will touch on later as well. Once you've got to the relevant holding point as well, that's the time obviously then to do all your necessary power and pre-takeoff checks there as well. What's sometimes helpful is, before you set off from where you parked, is to just verbally say, or even think in your head, just think through your taxi route as well. So, if you're going out of Oxford, you might like to say, okay, once I set off, I'm going to turn left again out of parking, continue down taxiway Delta, but I'm making a mental note not to go past the hold Alpha 1 by the fire station until air traffic have cleared me on or something. So as you get used to it, it might help you to verbalize something like that as well. Not in too much detail, but just have a mental model of where you're going and where you need to stop or where you need to take care as you go along. Okay.
Interesting. Firstly, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, brilliant.
Just jumping in on the taxi thing there, Matt. I'm sure you might cover it later on.
Yeah.
I've come to find in the past that it can actually be one of the worst things, right? Because it's not the normal route. So if it's the normal route and you do it every single day, it's absolutely fine, right? It's when that NOTAM appears that you don't know, right? And there's a friend of mine who will remain nameless that didn't look at the NOTAMs and taxied onto wet concrete, despite the fact it was coned off, said, do not taxi this way. That was the normal way that they went. Okay, didn't pay any attention to the NOTAM, straight into wet concrete. And that was pretty embarrassing. So better to learn from someone else's mistakes than your own, clearly. But yeah, I would heartily agree with Matt that sometimes, particularly if it's a test, right, you then just completely forget where you're going. So it's always worth working out how to get to the runway. Anyway.
Yeah. Brilliant. And just responding to a couple of people in the chat box about using 2 stages of flap, a flap 25 departure and a PA 28 off grass. Yes, absolutely. The short field, that would be an entirely appropriate technique to use, which may actually bring your figures down into an acceptable range. So yeah, very good points to pick up on there. You can see that I obviously used the same configuration to give an example. So yes, but excellent points, and that would be a very good threat and error mitigation to do in that condition. So thank you for that contribution. So poll 3 then, let's have a look at this. I'd be interested to see what people think about that. Do you complete a pre-takeoff emergency brief? Yes, always, even if I'm solo. Yes, but only if I'm not flying solo. Only if I'm flying with passengers. No. Okay, so this is basically talking about, do you do one all the time, no matter who's in the airplane? Do you do it with, with a pilot or whatever? Do you do it with passengers, if that's who you've got, or you don't do one at all? No right or wrong answer on this, as always. We're just interested to see what people are doing out there. So Chloe, let's have a look at some results. Okay, so we've got quite a big number of people do it all the time, even if they're on their own. Good to see. And then we've got some people that do and don't. Okay. Like I say, what may be appropriate for some operations might not always be appropriate. I used to fly a single seat RF4. Is it appropriate to do it on my own all the time or not? You can make that decision depending on your operation and your familiarity as well, but something to think about. I think it's a good thing to do all of the time. Even if you don't verbally say it, at least run through it mentally in your head if you're on your own as well. And the benefit of this is what we're talking about is it's pre-prompting that mental model in our brain again as well. It gives us a reminder perhaps of some key speeds, key actions, things that we would do in the event of some kind of emergency or some kind of unexpected event. When time is of the essence, if we've pre-primed our brain to think about these things, what we're hoping is that startle factor, that time when we're struggling to figure out what to do, can be reduced, and we can perhaps be a little more accurate in our actions as well. Here you go. Here's something that you may want to think about in order to struct it. PED, and I actually had an S as well for PEDs. So what am I going to think about? Performance. Is there any factors that are going to affect me today, like a ret runway or a particular crossing? Do I need to be airborne by a particular point if it's a short runway, or am I going to throw the takeoff away? Then emergencies. What am I going to do if I have an engine malfunction or a caption or a problem before I've lifted off? What are my initial actions? If I have an engine failure or an engine problem on takeoff, what are my initial actions? What speed am I going to aim to select? Where am I going to try and go? And in this, what we might want to do is try and tailor it to the conditions of the day. So we might be saying, for example, if I have an engine problem, I'm going to pitch down and select best glide speed of 75 knots. I know there's a large village out to the left, so I'm going to aim to go straight ahead or make a turn to the right, something like that as well. And then the departure. So it's useful to think about what you're going to do actually on departure. So you might say to yourself, once we're through 1,000 feet, I'm going to turn right and go on a rough heading of east towards my remote start point as well. And the S I talk about is really a mitigation against infringements or whatever. So it might be what you could call it a stop level or special procedures. So you might say to yourself, and I must remember, I can't climb above 2,000 feet until I get cleared by air traffic. Okay, so something like that. You might want to structure it yourself, but something that works for you. But those are some of the things you might want to consider. And while we're on it as well, when is the last time you thought about actions you would take in the event of a rejected takeoff? Okay, something that should be tested as part of the SCP class rating if you look at the schedule, but it's something we don't often think about that often. So next time you do your instructor flight, your biannual, might be something that you want to practice with an instructor if you haven't done one for a while, a rejected takeoff. So imagine, you have an engine problem, we have a warning light come on, the door comes open on the takeoff as well. How are we going to reject the takeoff and stop the takeoff as well? Surprising, can catch a few people out as well. Happened to me for real about 3 months ago in a Duchess. The right-hand door popped on the takeoff roll as well, just before we're about to lift off. So we had to close the throttles, come to a stop, weren't on a huge runway at Taton Hill. So, it quite a little bit of work and a little bit of thought. And there was, even with myself having done a brief, there was that 5 seconds of bang, what was that? Oh, look around, look, it's right, stop, and that delay time there as well. Right, I'll now hand over to Chris, who's going to talk about arrivals, because we've talked lots about getting out of the place. Let's talk about getting into wherever we want to go or getting back home. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, mate. Before we do that, though, I commend you on your efforts with the Duchess. Having flown the Duchess a reasonable amount, personally, I find it quite a horrible aeroplane to fly with the doors closed, let alone when they open. So well done. Right, let's got some good chat in the chat box there. So some chat about make sure you select a good place to do your power check so you don't slip onto the runway. That's very good. Yes, you've taxied to the runway, you've got there, you've achieved. And now all of a sudden, you slip onto the runway because you've messed up your power check. So that's a very good point. Thanks for raising that one. Yeah, so good. Keep that stuff coming in the chat. Right, let's chat about arrivals, as Matt says now. Here we go. So funny old thing, we're going to start with another poll. Another poll, please, Chloe. Thank you. So poll number 4. Okay, what do you find most difficult about joining the circuit? Options are other aircraft not being where they should be, or flying inaccurately, poor RT in the circuit, other people joining in conflict, maintaining my situational awareness. So what do you find most difficult about joining the circuit? And we've all been there, right? Other aircraft not being where they should be or flying inaccurately, poor RT, other people joining in conflict, or maintaining my SA or situational awareness. Okay, great. Let's have a look at the results then. So quite an even split there, actually. So what we've got 31% of other aircraft not being where they should be or flying inaccurately. Yeah, we've all been there. People flying bomber circuits. Poor RT in the circuit, only 8% there. Okay, that's an interesting one because we've got to cover off some RT stuff later on. Other people joining in conflict. Yes, that's joining. Essentially, is joining without SA, isn't it? You're joining thinking you know where people are, and then all of a sudden, somebody pitches up underneath you or to the right-hand side of you. And then maintaining my situational awareness at 33%. Yeah, that's a challenge, isn't it? When you're trying to pick out all of those aircraft in the circuit before you descend, particularly, for example, doing an overhead join. Great, thank you for your thoughts on that. Right then, so let's talk about arrivals. It's easy, right? We've all done it. We've got airborne, we've done the bits and bobs. We've either been in our transit flight on local area NavX or our bit of general handling. We'll come back to the airfield. Okay, it's the airfield you know and love. It's really easy, isn't it? But actually, sometimes, as you just pointed out in the poll, it's not quite as easy as it seems. I always like to think about the circuit first and then build out from there. So let's look at that, shall we? First. Okay, again, we're back to everyone knows how to fly the circuit, don't they? We've had it drummed into us for years by the likes of Matt. particularly on our annual checks, I'm certainly guilty of, flying bomber circuits. I seem to remember when an instructor of mine said at one point, having done some circuits, I think it was on check flight, said to me, now show me a circuit I can recognize. That's obviously not a great start, is it? However, there are often, quite often, issues in the circuits, as you've just alluded to, okay? So what can we do, okay, if we are in the circuit, okay? Before we even start thinking about joining, what can we do ourselves in the circuit? So to keep it simple, right, keep everything as standard as possible for the circuit at your location. Now, this is, as shown on the screen, is a standard square circuit, but where you fly, there may be noise abatement procedures, there may be adjusted downwind legs, things you can't fly over, etc. So avoids. So therefore, stick to the procedures that are dictated by your airfield. Fly the correct heights, fly the correct speeds, and make the RT calls in the right place. Okay, so if you think of it from the other side, if you were joining and all the people in the circuit were doing exactly that, they were in the right place at the right time, telling you where they were, then the actual arrival part will be a lot easier, wouldn't it? So keep everything as simple as possible. That's what we would say on that one. Right, on to the arrivals itself then. So we've done the circuit, we know what we're going to do. We're going to keep it standard in that circuit, but building out from the circuit, we now need to join that circuit, okay? So go into the books, and there's some good information on this in the Skyway code. It's relatively generic, but it does encapsulate quite a lot of good stuff in there, so I would commend you to look at it. But they do recommend that ideally contact should be made around 10 minutes prior to intended arrival. So 10 minutes or 15 miles, something like that. Okay, unless there's any specific procedures that dictate otherwise. So if the aircraft has an ATIS and you've already copied that, you might not necessarily need to do that, but you should at least get the following information: the runway in use, the circuit direction, and the QNH or the QFA. So you'll either get that off the ATIS or you'll get that from the person you contact at the airfield, providing, of course, that there is air traffic available at the airfield. So, of course, as those of you that fly to airground radio airfields, you know that you may not always get a response on that anyway. So, but however, at controlled airfields, you're likely to be instructed to join a particular manner, such as join overhead or join downwind. You can also, depending on from where you're coming from, you may be able to request that of the airfield you're arriving at. Uncontrolled airfield, however, then you'll have to decide for yourself which join is most appropriate given the circumstances you find yourself in. Blind calls are quite useful on the airfield frequency, because in theory, then other people will start piping up, and there you'll be able to work out where they are. And we come back to that circuit diagram we've just spoken about, which is if everyone's saying the correct RT in the right place, then it is an SA builder for the joining aircraft. So once you've decided which join you're going to do, announce your intentions as you approach the ATZ. So if you do make contact with ATC, if there is one, and having received the relevant information prior to getting there, then you should make sure that you should have identified the runway in use, worked out the circuit direction and height, set the QNH or QFV, and switched on your landing lights and decided how you will join. Unlike what I did a few years ago at an airfield, I transposed runway 23 into runway 28 and went snotting down runway 28. Fortunately, the circuit was clear, much to the mirth and merriment of the guy sat at the back of my airplane. Never mind. Got away with that one. The join, however, is normally dictated by your arrival direction, of course. So if you're coming counter to the circuit, you may elect to do a downwind join. Alternatively, if you're going with the circuit or coming join 90 degrees off to it, something like an overhead join may suffice. So it's entirely up to you, but it will normally be dictated by your arrival direction, as you, I'm sure, well know. But when you are that 10 minutes out, that 15 miles out, and you have made contact and you are on the frequency and you are getting radio calls from other aircraft in the circuit, that's when you can start to build your mental model. So I would tend to put the HSI course bar on or anything that's got of use on the runway direction, and then I can then work out which way the circuit is based on that. So use your DI course bar, HSI, something like that. That will help you visualize and build that mental model of where everyone is in the circuit. Also, think about the wind as well, which is a standard instructor comments. I won't tell you any more bad experiences of me with wind in the circuit anyway. So think about the wind as well. Right, if you are flying without ground station or two-way contact, please do continue to announce your position and intention so that other aircraft in the circuit can hear what's going on. Likewise, and I've said it again, probably for the third time, if they are in the circuit and broadcasting at the relevant point and time, then that will also be an SA builder for you as you join. If, however, you find yourself joining an airfield where there is no assigned frequency, then feel free to use safety comm, because that should have something, that's what everybody else should be using, more of which later on. So we've built the circuit. We're going to be really good in the circuit, and we're going to say everything at the right time in the right place, fly the correct speeds and heights, and do all the noise abatement stuff, and fly a standard circuit. And then when we're joining, we're going to announce our intentions 10 miles out, 10 minutes out, 15 miles, something like that nature. We're going to join in accordance with the standard published procedures, and we're going to think about our circuit direction, which will dictate which type of join we're going to do, and we're going to build SA on the way in. And that will help everybody, particularly the joining aircraft, have a safe and expeditious join into the circuit. Right, joining. We're going to cover a couple of different, well, actually the main types of join here. We're not going to completely unpick every single join and tell you exactly how to do it, because we could do an entire seminar session. We could do probably half a day on this probably if we needed to. So we're not going to do that. We're going to quickly canter through the different types of join, which most of you will be aware of. Again, I'll refer back to Skyway code, and I've got some of the diagrams from that. Is very good for this. So if you need a quick refresher and a brush up, then feel free to have a quick look at that. In fact, Chloe has kindly just popped that in the chat box for you all there. It's pretty good. So the overhead join, the one we all know and love. Okay. The advantage of this one, of course, is it does allow you to observe the traffic circuit below, and it also allows you to, maintain height and not get in conflict with anybody else, right? So you can pick out the guy that says he's downwind, it actually isn't downwind, he's, on base. You can pick out the guy that on final, etc. So you can work out who's who, where they all are, and then prior to making that descent down to circuit height. So that is I would argue, standard join, and it allows you to build SA by remaining at height. Okay, as I said before, have a look in the Skyway code. The numbers on there can refer clearly to arriving, turning, descending, and then joining the circuit there, as you can see. Other joins that we have in the mix then. Okay, what have we got? We've got a downwind join, clearly. The gotchas with a downwind join. Okay, this is back to my own personal experience. Not slowing down in enough time. Getting to the top of downwind and realizing that you're still going like the clappers is not a good look. So ensure you take the time to slow down well prior to joining to a downwind join, because that is one of the gotchas, clearly. And also, another gotcha is turning base inside other traffic, because you haven't identified that traffic that's late downwind, for example, that's slightly wide. Or maybe you're slightly close to the runway, and then you turn inside them. So there's a couple of gotchas on the downwind join, but it is an expeditious join and is useful if you're coming from that particular direction, and an overhead join won't necessarily work. We've got a crosswind join as well, sometimes called a midfield join, and that involves joining at circuit height from the dead side at 90 degrees off the runway, and then turning downwind to join the circuit. That provides you with a little bit of more ability to gain SA on arrival, by being able to clearly look left and right as per the diagram to identify other circuit traffic. But you are at circuit height at that point, so maybe think about, I wouldn't necessarily call it an escape option, but what are the options if, for example, on the slide, you do have conflicting traffic joining downwind maybe. So have a think about how you could get out of that situation if it didn't go particularly well. We've got the base leg join, which you see in number 3 there on the right-hand side, which is exactly what it says in the tin, joining at base. Another gotcha on that one, similar to the downwind join, probably need to get your speed sorted out well prior to actually pitching into there, and keeping a good lookout, as per this circuit diagram, to the left to make sure there's nothing coming downwind that's going to conflict with you. And then finally, number 4, we've got the straight-in approach. This one generates the least SA for you in terms of working out who's where in the circuit. Potential conflicts, of course, coming from base on the left-hand side. However, to gain and generate SA for you as a joiner and other people in the circuit, it's recommended to call something like long final well prior to 4 nautical miles on the runway. So give a long final call prior to a short final or a final call. and that will help you in terms of working out. You may well get a response, but it'll also help other aircraft in the circuit avoid you if required. So that was a very quick canter through arrivals. We're now going to go and talk about RT, aren't we, Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And some good points in the chat about Sky Demon. Other apps are available that have similar features, but their Make Approach feature is really good. It will generate, you know, kind of circuit joining overlays and kind of flashes on the chart for you. Don't want to go heads down. It's really not the time to be going heads down, staring at your iPad when you're trying to join a busy airfield. But it can really help you if you've got it mounted appropriately to glance and orientate you as well. So yeah, there we go. Okay, let's move on then and have a look at RT. We've got another poll, please, to just start this off. Here you go, just to get you thinking, which of the following cannot be issued by FISO? Instructions on how to taxi to parking, instructions on information, sorry, on joining traffic, clearance to take off, or a request to report when downwind. So just give you clue is in some of the name, the nomenclature of the answers there as well. So let's have a look at the results. Clearance takeoff. Yes, everybody gets the idea. Yep, foreign says can't give clearances to take off or land, definitely. So let's have a look then at, if we can put up the next slide, please. Here you go. This is again information from the Skyway Code. I'm not going to talk all the way through this. Again, we could do a whole other seminar on RT alone as well. If you're unconfident in your RT or you want to brush up, there are whole seminars and courses. The BGA run them for the gliding community and welcome other people as well. So do the LAA as well. Some independent providers, people like Lee does RT brush up courses over Zoom and things as well. So there are plenty out there as well. What I want to highlight here is there is a hierarchy starting from safety comm, it's the kind of the most basic level, right the way up to full air traffic approach control as well. Okay, so if nothing else, if you understand that hierarchy and how it builds up with increasing levels of control over you, that is very useful and something that I recommend you do. So let's recap. We're going to do this with a few polls. Like I say, don't worry, this is not an exam. We don't get to see any results. We don't get to see who has said what at all. I can assure you of that. But this is just to get some thinking here as well. So let's have the first one, please. You're joining an airfield that has Airground. Would you expect to receive traffic and weather at discretion of the operator, be told where to report, just to make position calls, expect no answer, receive airfield details and joining clearance? So this is an Airground. Let's get you thinking. What are you like to get from an Airground? Give people another 5 seconds or so for this one. What's the answers that we've got then, please, Chloe? Yeah, so A is really the right answer there as well. Interesting that people are saying just make position calls and expect no answers. We've had a question in related to that as well, but we will cover in Q&A. So those people hold that those thoughts. That's it's very pertinent. Thank you there as well. Next one then. So let's have a look. You're joining an airfield, let's call it Fairway, which uses safety comm to enable. Which of the following would be a correct call? There you go, I'll let you read them yourself. So it's Fairway is the airfield that's on safety comm. You're in Golf Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, that famous aeroplane that seems to get everywhere. And you're about 10 miles away. What would be a good, sensible call to make as well? Give you another 5 seconds and let's have a look at the answer. And there's a little nuance in here that hopefully people may or may not have picked up. Let's have a look at the answers. Yeah, look at that. So the interesting bit there is, according to CAP 413, which as most of you know is a Bible, because it's a joint frequency, you should use the traffic suffix and repeat the airfield name at the end. So there you go, answer C, Fairway traffic. call sign where you are, join the overhead fairway at the end as well, so people know where it's going. And last but one poll, please. Let's have a look at this one. Joining an aerodrome that has airfield that has an aerodrome control service. Select approach, call them at 15 nautical miles. What would you expect to get from here? It's an aerodrome control service. Hopefully most of you can see where this one is going now. Another 5 seconds, please. And let's have a look at the answers now, Chloe. Hopefully people have got the idea now. Yeah, there we go. It's because it's an aerodrome control. You're getting a clearance and you're getting mandatory instructions inside the ATZ. And final poll on this one then, please. Let's have a look at the last one. You've done your power checks at the hold, you're ready to go, and you're at a FISO airfield. What must you do prior to entering the runway? Have a look at those. Do you request clearance? Request clearance, taxi onto runway, and off you go. Tell ATC you're entering the runway. Line up and take off at your discretion. Okay, another 5 seconds, please. And what's people's answers here? Yeah, quite a split here as well. So we can talk about this in Q&A as well, but there is this ready for departure call that CAP 413 talks about, where you then get information, but it isn't a clearance. And I think that's the nuance that we're going on here as well, because they can't clear you to take off or depart as well. So there's this little different exchange and emphasis at the hold, where you're going from being told what to do onto the ground to doing things at your discretion. And it's well worth reading CAP 413 to understand where those nuances come in and where that kind of change of responsibility, if you like, comes in as well. Okay, thanks. So just a few final slides to wrap up before we go into Q&A then. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Yeah, enhancement and destruction. Sounds very dramatic, doesn't it, of situational awareness as well. Brevity and clarity, you probably remember this from the old RT exams as well. Try and be clear and try and be concise as well. There's nothing worse than calls jamming up the airways of ers and ums, and we all do it. We all get tongue-tied. We all get a little bit, but the temptation is to kind of continue to fill the space with talking. Sometimes it's better just to stop transmitting, rethink, and then retransmit again, rather than blocking up things, because somebody else might be trying to get a call in, or the air controller or the FISO might be trying to also make something happen as well. If you've ever been to some, I was flying at Oxford last week, tower frequency, ground wasn't open because of towers. I know Gloucester's had the problem. Tower frequency, hugely congested, even got ground movements calling there as well. And it was very, very difficult to get calls in as well. And you had to be really quite slick to get that in there as well. Okay, and next slide, please. Position reporting. Chris already touched on this as well, but like I say, on the RT, really important to try and get it accuracy as well. You know, it's nothing worse than flying in, you know, you're coming over, about to call, yeah, over whatever lakes for rejoin, and then you hear somebody else saying, oh, I'm at so-and-so lakes for rejoin. You're looking around, can't see them anywhere there as well. So do try and get those calls accurate, because otherwise it just increases the workload and difficulties for anybody else joining there as well. And again, you know, electronic conspicuity can help you with this, but remember, not everybody will show up, because not everybody may be carrying, or you may not be receiving what they're carrying or transmitting there as well. Okay, and next slide, please. And RT in the circuit, again, Chris very much touched on this as well. Try and get your calls in the right place and using the right terminology there as well. One of the things you often may get is people calling, you know, final when they're not really on final, and then it kind of almost clogs up final, or you sometimes hear people putting lots of extraneous transmissions in that just clog up the RT and don't really add to people's situational awareness. So if you look on the slide there, that's another one from Skyway Code. Those are the real key positions and radio calls as well that you should hopefully be familiar with making on there as well. Okay, and like I say, it's all about building people's situational awareness on there as well. Okay,
I think the most common one I seem to remember, well, most of the time really, Matt, I think, see what you think, is
yeah,
it's the delayed downwind call, isn't it? It's like you're busy at the top of downwind and you're doing your checks, your downwind checks, and then you've completely forgotten to make the call, or everything's just taking a little bit longer than normal, and then you make a downwind call but you're not in the right position. I think that for me is the most common one.
Yeah, and you know, like I say, there is a tendency, you know, the point is, and I think somebody commented about right of way precedent and all the rest of it, you know, the point is you should only really move on to the next, and I think this is what Michael Benson is getting at here, is you should only move on to the next phase and position in the circuit when you're confident that you've got awareness of where everybody else is, whether you've got right of way or not. What you don't want to do is just plow on in a manner that, well, I've got right of way, I'm continuing. Well, that might be the case, but you know, is that really sensible? You know, discretion may be the better part of it, and the go around might be better if you're unsure of where other people are as well. And the only other point I would make on that as well is, remember, you can carry out a go around from anywhere in the circuit. People sometimes think that a go around is a maneuver that can only be carried out from short final. You can go around from base leg, you can go around from the downwind leg if you need to. That's quite effective. Okay, there's some good stuff coming in the chat as well, Chris, as well. Yeah,
looking at that now, so let's have a look. So yes, air traffic sometimes jam up the airway, so you can't get your downwind call in. Completely agree with that. What else have we got in here? There's someone, so David says, say turning base rather than base. Discuss, don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, you don't really necessarily, a lot of it depends on the particular airfield. So Oxford and Gloucester, they will often sometimes ask you to report ready for base leg because they're sequencing radar traffic and sequencing other arrivals and that as well. So it very much depends on your position. If you're already going through the turn onto a base leg and you haven't been able to get your call in, it might be an appropriate thing to do. But if you've already called downwind and you think you're going to be able to call final in appropriate times, you know, you might not need to make a base leg call at all at your airfield. So it's very situational dependent, I think.
Eric's made a good point on, so Rog Mikado, I think that is, there's a brilliant bit on your mind going blank when keying the PTT, so that's worth looking up for our audience. Some discussion on Cat 403 and Pooley's Combook don't always agree. I've always thought that Cat 403 was the Bible, Matt. You know,
so yeah, Cap 413 is the RT, is the official publication. Pooley's and other books should conform, but of course they may be slightly out of date with amendments or whatever. So really, yeah, the CAA published information is the key ones. Yeah.
Good question from Joshua on how would you position if going around from base, for example?
Okay, so if you're going around from the base leg, you should fly level at circuit height, fly across, position on the dead side, fly up the dead side and rejoin the circuit from base leg. Yep. Or climb back to circuit height if you've already started in the descent. Okay, being careful as you cross, not to cause a confliction, of course, with traffic that may already be established on final.
Yeah, I'll just take one more out of the chat box before I've got a couple of questions that have been sent in. So let's just have a very quick one from Craig, which was, how should an overhead join look when joining from the dead side?
How should an overhead join look?
Joining on the dead side, should you avoid and join from the live side?
How should an overhead join look when you join
from the dead side, rather than arriving live side and then turning 90 left and then heading over. And
Right.
dropping
Okay. So I think I know what Craig's getting at is descending through the dead side. What you're talking about, Craig, I think is a crosswind joint, in effect.
I mean, alternatively, you could stay at height, right?
Yep.
Cross over the dead side onto the live side, remaining at height, and then just do a 180 and then do a standard overhead join.
Yeah. So effectively, you could, as Chris said, if descending for a crosswind join wasn't applicable, yes, you could cross over. I'm sort of drawing it with my hand in my home office here. Kind of go round the loop once and then into the pattern to descend as well. You know what? Overhead joins cause so much discussion, so much debate. You know, it does make me wonder about them, whether sometimes the amount of confusion and worry that they think, whether it is always worth it. And of course, they come back from the days when we would join airfields non-radio, and we would fly overhead to look at the signal square. That's where it comes from originally. So you've got to think, are they really applicable? They have their uses, but if you're not 100% sure of what you're doing, don't barrel in and make it up, is my advice with an overhead joint, because you can create more problems than you're going to solve.
Okay, great. Let's crack on with a couple more questions. I've got one that's been sent in by Mike. It's a bit lengthy. Here we go. Do you think the recent CAA change to air to ground, requiring operators to be, in inverted commas, at their station for all of the notified times and not subject to interruptions, will make some airfields give up air to ground altogether or promulgate vastly reduced hours?
Right. So what this is talking about, and I'm looking over here because I've pulled it up on my iPad. There's a supplementary amendment cap 452, which is aeronautical. It's basically the Airground radio stations operators guide. Has come out on the 4th of August. It refers to an investigation of an incident by the AEIB and discussions with the CAA. I don't know what incident that is, and I haven't seen those recommendations. I don't know whether they've been published yet, so I can't comment on that. But as Chris says, what it talks about is CA reminding airground operators that they should provide a continuous service during the notified hours, and the airground operator should be free from distraction. So I think what this is talking about is you go to some places and the airground operator is a radio in the cafe, and it's the person, you know, serving the bacon butties and the teas, kind of giving some information on the radio and that as well. So I think what this is all about, and my take on it is this is the CAA trying to say, hey, everybody, we should manage expectations. We should set expectations. So if, you know, the airground operator is always going to be away for lunch for an hour, or it's only going to be provided at weekends or whatever, let's publish that. Let's make everybody aware of that, rather than people calling, getting no answer, and then doing all of the traffic calls and all the rest of it. You know, let's be open and clear about the fact that there's somebody on duty providing a service at these times and days or whatever. So I think this is all about setting expectations. So I don't think it will necessarily stop people doing anything or degrade the service. I think it's all about, it's basically saying, let's all be clear to each other what's provided when and what you can expect as a pilot arriving. So I think that's what it's about. I'll be interested myself to see what incident it came from when it's published. I'll be interested to read that. I don't have the details.
Cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Right, this one's from David then. Is the information given in the Skyway Code online edition updated frequently, or is it the same as that information in the hard copy? As far as I'm aware, Skyway Code is on version 2. It is updated periodically, i.e. annually / biannually. It's not updated on a monthly basis. There's no regular update cycle on that. When they do update it, it's updated as a one, and then the next version that will be issued will be version 3. If you do have hard copies, however, always worth a quick check back to see that it's still the correct version that you've printed out. They're on version 2 now. Okay, another one from Tiago. This one's for you, Matt. If you are an airfield like Andrewsfield, where Stansted CTA / CTR is right above you, what's the best way to ask for a zone crossing? Takeoff, move to safe location and ask for crossing, or another method?
Okay, so I'm not going to give you a bespoke answer here, because my answer would be it's very much dependent on local procedures and anything published about arrivals and departures. So lots of airfield have very specific ones. If you've been in and out of North Weald, they have them. For example, Red Hill does as well. Blackbush has some with Farnborough as well, with clearances in and out. Coventry, I see Coventry is mentioned a number of times as well in the chat. Coventry has, you know, clearance procedures for and defined squawks there as well. So what I would suggest is speaking to wherever you're going as part of the PPR, or speaking to somebody on the airfield as a booking out, and getting some good advice on what to do. As with everything, always try and have a plan B. Yeah. So if for some reason you can't get a clearance, or your clearance is denied, always have a plan B as to where you're going and what you're going to do if you don't get the clearance that you expect. All right.
Going back to my previous answer, I've had numbered dyslexia, as many of you pointed out. Thank you. Skyway Code version 3 is in fact out, and version 4 will be the next one. My apologies. I've got one question here from Rod. It's quite lengthy, but I think it encapsulates basically saying that the Skyway Code includes a diagram depicting a standard overhead join, which is different from the diagram in CAP 413. Clearly, these are both CAA documents. So rather than ask the question, Rod, let me go back to the CAA and point that out and see if they can align the two.
Yeah, so I think what that and some of the earlier chat was, some of it talks like about a continuous arcing descent. Some of the diagrams show it as a sort of, you know, straight descent, turn, parallel, straight descent. So yeah, I think it's good to go and clarify on that. What I would say though is you should be modifying your track and your descent so that you fit in with the established circuit traffic. Okay, so just because you're descending dead side doesn't effectively give you license then just to smash into the circuit crosswind whenever you want to. The onus is still on you when you're descending dead side to modify and ensure that you fit in with the established circuit traffic. All right.
Cool, thank you. Well, from Stephen now. How do you find out whether an air-ground airfield has a FISO on duty and therefore need clearances for ground movements? How do you
so I think this comes down to that allied to that CAP 452 amendment we talked about. It's all about the published hours there as well. And if you call an information service, they should respond with the fact that they've been downgraded or not operating information there as well. Okay, so they listen out to what responses you get there as well.
Great, thanks. Okay, I've got 3 questions now on go-arounds from downwind from go around from downwind, go around from base. So please, can you talk through a go-around procedure map from downwind and base, please?
Okay, so it's all about rejoining the established circuit pattern. Okay, so if you imagine that you need to track down the dead side, yep, so just parallel to the runway, just offset into the dead side at circuit height. So it's all about, if you're doing a go around, you're getting back to that position so you can track up the dead side at circuit height and then turn and go back crosswind at circuit height, if that makes sense. Okay, so it's all about, and you've got to do this, you've got to not fly into confliction to other traffic that is ahead of you, or you know, you can't get in the way of other things there as well. Okay, but don't think you have to consider and plow all the way down to, you know, short final before you can do a go around. Yeah, if it's not going to work out, you can go around, and you may well have to, because some people may elect to try and extend downwind. There's some airfields, Blackbush for example, you can't do that. You would get an infringement, so you would have to go around early as well. And I noticed somebody's just popped in the chat saying not all airfields have a dead side. Yes, quite right, because of rotary traffic or similar. may not have a dead side as well, so you may have to follow the runway track, or there may either be local specific procedures published about go around as well. But hey, you know, we all have to do the biannual instructional flight. Maybe it's one to try. Maybe it's one to go and have a discussion about with some of your flying friends and some of your instructors on there as well. Okay. So a lot of confusion coming in the chat about this. So I don't want to give a ground lesson in the 30 minutes we've got. Go and seek out some instructors, discuss it with some of your friends there as well. Okay, but just think about it. You're on base leg. You're about to descend. You can see that it's not going to work out. There's somebody ahead too close. It's not going to work out. What are you going to do? Okay, think it through. What are you going to do? You're about to descend on the base leg. It's not going to work out. You need to go around the circuit. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? That's what you need to answer for yourself. All right.
Very much on that. Thanks, mate. Right.
Cool.
Okay. We have worked with the flying reporter, John Hunt, and he has produced a very good, very entertaining and very good video on arrivals, departures and RT, where actually he does an overhead join, and he's quite scared of going to the airfield. I think Elstree, I think it is, because he hasn't been there for a while, and he's going off with an instructor. So lots of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight is encapsulated in that video. Chloe's put that link in the chat box. I would commend you to go and have a look at that. You can also get to it through our website. Really entertaining, really interesting video. So please go and check that out. So we will work with him for this. So that's really worth it. Right, unfortunately, we've come to time. I hope you've all been able to take something away from this. I've personally really enjoyed it. It's been a really good chat around arrivals, departures and RT, something that we all have to do. You know, we've all made mistakes with it. We will all continue to make mistakes with it, but let's learn from each other. So it's been really good. Thanks for all of your points and all of your contributions in the chat box and the polls and the Q&A. It's been great. So brilliant. We're going to send you a survey after this. So please fill that in and let us have that back. And please check out the website. The socials are on the screen. And don't forget to sign up to Skywise. Thanks ever so much, Matt. Thanks ever so much, Chloe, working in the background. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks.